Serious, CPS workers of Reddit, what are some horror stories that you've encountered? My agency 30 years ago had a boy that was beaten and forced into child pornography. When he was rescued at 8, he had burn marks all over him. His arms, back, and face had been sliced with a knife. His back had chain-whipped scars and his arm was broken so badly that it never healed right. The nerve damage resulted in the need for it to be amputated. The boy spoke with a stutter and was paranoid. He was put in a group home and in a foster home. He was close with his foster family's neighbors and ran away with them when they moved away. He wasn't found until he was 21. So he was legally allowed to stay with them. We didn't work with him since he ran away. But 2 years ago I saw him being interviewed on TV. He was shockingly healthy looking. No stutter. I hope he found the peace and love he deserved with the family he ran away with. One of the worst was a case I was jointly investigating with police, and the teen girl was being constantly by her stepfather. The girl told me that her stepdad would always tell her they were lovers in a past life and they are celestial soulmates. I told her whenever he would have sex with his wife he couldn't keep his heart unless he thought of her. The mother knew for years what was going on but didn't want to leave him. We confronted the mom about the stepdad and she knew the stepdad couldn't come unless he fantasizes about her daughter. When the detective told the mom she was being arrested, her only response was, "But I have work in the morning." She had no remorse. That will always stay with me. I worked with a family where the mother and her 2 children under the age of 4 were held hostage, savagely raped, at times with loaded firearms, and brutally tortured for a few months before they were able to escape. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget the images of their mangled bodies from that first night I saw them in the ER. Barely recognizable as humans. I think the hardest part of that whole story is that the children are in custody and flourishing. The plan is reunification with the mother who is back with the abuser. Another time, a little girl was complaining to her teacher about how her down there hurts because daddy was rough with her. Turns out daddy admitted he liked to make videos of himself, his single-digit age daughter. He planned on showing them to his wife in the event she did not want to have sex with him. I've also had other cases that are bad, but not as traumatic to experience as a worker. Like a mom who tried to sell her children on Craigslist. Physical abuse that causes broken bones but goes unreported. And mental health issues that affect how well a mother can take care of her kids. I was surprised how a lot of my assumptions about being a CPS worker have been completely shattered by the families I encountered as an intern in a forensic unit. It wasn't the poor and downtrodden that I interacted with most of the time, but the middle-class white family that would go unnoticed. It really blows my mind. From my wife, who works with disabled, abused, otherwise non-standard kids. One day, we had a potential new kid for our daycare program. We were showing him TH facility, and he noticed a few workers who were replacing a window. Another kid put a chair through it far morning. Looks at them and asks, "What you as fuckers doing?" We were ever so slightly appalled. But then again, the kid has a rough home life. After the tour, we stuck him in one of the groups to see how he got along with other children. Cue a high-pitched scream and a crying kid. What happened, you ask? The little guy had crawled between a skirt-wearing woman's legs and tried to shove his finger right in her lady bits. When questioned, he stated that he does it with his sister all the time. We later learned that the whole family often watched together. Hilulu foster care. And now for the shocker. That little boy was 5 years old. Not with CPS, but I was a child therapist who worked in a school. I saw some really terrible stuff. One thing that broke my heart was a kid who frequently defecated on himself while at school. His parent wouldn't take him to the doctor to make sure there was no physical issue, and wouldn't be bothered to send him with extra clothes or bring him extra clothes. So he would have to spend all day in school with poop in his pants. His teachers would sit a chair outside the classroom near the door so he could still hear the lessons. He wasn't even one of my clients, because his parent wouldn't agree. I think I may be too late. Here it is. I was working as a social worker and got called for an emergency case. I had to drive 3.5 hours south to pick up a 3-year-old girl. The only information I got was be prepared for a bad case. When I got to the hospital where the child was at, I was led to the room where the child's aunt and the child were. The aunt had no emotions towards me. The child, however, was a bit nervous but was ready to be held. I was in a bit of shock. I was not warned that the child had open oozing burns over her face, head, stomach, and legs. I was prepped by the nurses, then told I would be transporting the child and aunt back up north. The entire ride I talked with the baby and sang to her. I had to make several stops to hold her and soothe her. The aunt said nothing. Right before dropping the aunt off, she asked me if she could take the baby. I told her no. She had to go to the caregivers. No other discussion. Aunt walked off without saying bye to baby. I drove baby to the caregiver. Introduced them. The baby did not want to leave me. I tried to get the caregivers to give her a gift. Feed her. Nothing worked. Finally, I just had to leave. I left out the back door. When I looked back, I heard the baby screaming and I could see her staring through the window crying. I drove away. Halfway home I vomited because the thought of leaving her made me ill. I felt as though I too abandoned her. Most cases don't get to me. This little girl did. I found later. The burns were from her mother accidentally dropping a pot of boiling water on her head for the second time. I work for CPS and am still fairly new to the agency. Most of the time, reports of abuse and neglect do not result in kids needing to be removed. So, at least there's that. My most interesting case involved a 12-year-old girl who was a registered sex offender. She had her siblings and the parents called CPS to ask for help because they weren't sure how to handle it. The girl ended up being charged. I'm not sure why she wasn't given some sort of inpatient treatment program instead. This happened in another state. She was put on the registry. Her PO called CPS in my state when she and her family moved out here. Poor kid. She wasn't allowed to swim with her siblings. Couldn't go to school. Couldn't go to the park. Her siblings couldn't have friends over, etc. Just had a case where the mom was on probation for working with the cartel. Not going to give a lot of information on that, but it was definitely concerning. The cartel. One of my co-workers had a Munchausen by proxy case. This poor girl had so many surgeries and was so messed up that her mother had everyone convinced the girl was paralyzed. We got involved when the girl was 16 years old. She ended up graduating with a 4.0 and going to college. So at least it ended decent. 9-month-old with a 2-inch vaginal tear. 3-year-old burned when mom set his bedroom on fire and tried to kill him. The boy survived and had to have multiple surgeries for years. He also ended up with mental retardation due to oxygen deprivation during the accident. Those are the worst 2 cases. Worst I have ever heard absolutely turned my stomach. Worked with a lovely, kind, docile, funny guy who had formerly worked on mental health service vans. We were having a slow, quiet day and he was telling me why he would not do mental health work anymore. He was called to a farm in Wales where a woman of 21 had been discovered, malnourished with rickets and all manner of other problems. Chained up in a horse box. She had been kept there from a young age. She had been kept there by her father. The mother was complicit. She was regularly raped and beaten not just by her father but by his friends too. The guy I worked with was obviously hurt by what he saw. He didn't like his part in the process of helping her. He had to pick her up from a police cell where she had been for 2 days. She wouldn't make eye contact and winced and made a squeaking noise whenever men came near. I have heard some nasty stories but this one is easily the most loathsome. Too long. Didn't read girl kept in a horse box from young age and raped by father and his associates for years. Intake investigator here. The stuff I see is ridiculous. Walked into an active lab that was set up in the same room a little girl was sleeping in. Found the wandering 2-year-old. It was 5 hours before the parents realized he was missing. The cases where I actually do get a removal order. Prepping for court and having to defend why the agency felt the parents couldn't parent. That's almost as bad as investigating the allegations. Babies that haven't eaten in days. Homes that are so unkempt the homeless wouldn't even squat in them. The parents who need mental health services but refuse. Same for the parents who need substance abuse treatment. I see more drug-related allegations than anything. It's one of the most frustrating jobs ever. We have no authority. People don't have to let us in. Or take drug screens. Or talk to us at all. Our hands are so tied that I can't believe we actually can substantiate allegations. People don't realize that we try to intervene or place services with the families to prevent future maltreatment but are unable to do so because parents feel that they don't need the help. Or they dodge the workers' attempts at making contact. In my state we only have so many days to complete an investigation and then we have to close it to stay within state mandated time limits. It's hard work. But for the few kids who you can help it means the world.